Hey folks, Gary here with Paramount Tactical. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to shoot a tall target test. I'm going to show you exactly how to set this up, how to execute it properly, how to interpret the results, but most importantly, how to fix or adjust any discrepancies that it highlights. Now, technically, this is part 2 of my comprehensive guide to precision scope mounting, because if you're serious about long-range shooting, this is a critical component when it comes to mounting your optic. This test will show you whether or not your optic is mounted properly. It will also indicate whether or not it's tracking accurately. And if it's not tracking accurately, I'm going to show you how to fix that so that it is. So if you want to miss less and you want to see more impacts, you're going to want to watch this video. Let's get into it. All right, folks, so I am at the range. We're prepping some targets, and we'll talk about the 2 targets that you can use, as well as some different options when it comes to doing a tall target test. Strictly speaking, a tall target test specifically is there to test if your optic is tracking vertically, right? And so that's gonna let you know whether or not that your optic is mounted plumb. And one of the things you have to do with this, folks, is if you're gonna shoot this or even do just a tracking test by moving the reticle, and I'll talk about that in a second, is you gotta make sure that that gun is level while you're doing it. So you gotta have a very accurate level on the rail of that gun. So again, we're gonna be using the MDT LRA Send It level. Folks, that thing is so ridiculously accurate. I've been super impressed with that and can't recommend that enough. It's not cheap, it's about 225 bucks. They're on our website. But I think in the overall scheme of things, while you're doing your prep work, making sure that your gun is good, as well as while you're shooting, it's right there in your eye. And especially for those of you, if you have eyesight issues, you're not as young as you used to be, that really does help. Again, you got a nice big glowing green dot letting you know when your gun is level, and it's just hard to miss and it's hard to ignore. So anyways, got to make sure your gun's level. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's 2 different targets that I typically use for this. This is one target, and it is box2benchprecision.com. Not affiliated with them. You can go check them out. This is a great target. One of the things I love about this is like it's almost like a Tyvek. It's pretty much waterproof. I've used these out in the rain and everything else, so these are pretty good. Basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this out at 100 yards. And when I'm prepping this target, I'm gonna use both a level, and I'll even break out my plumb line to check that. But we're gonna use a carpenter level and hang this up to make sure that this line is actually 100% vertical. Now again, one of the things you can do is just draw a line on a piece of cardboard, start at the bottom, and make sure that you've mounted it plumb, using a level, using a plumb line, and then you can just work your way up that line. You can go 5 MOA, 5 mils, whatever you wanna do, right? But at the end of it, we should basically have impacts here and then impacts at the top, and everything is vertical. Now, we can get a little bit more in depth and we can start actually testing tracking, and you should. But again, kind of the constraints of this video, for the most part, is making sure that that gun is, or that optic is mounted level. On this one, we do have some tracking. So right here we have 5 MOA or 1.5 mils. I'm gonna show you the other target in a second. 10 MOA, 3.3 mils. And this is gonna be hung up at 100. I will tell you folks, there is a pretty, even with some of the more expensive laser rangefinders, you'll see quite a bit of variance even at 100, like 3 to 4 yards sometimes. This is meant to be shot at 100, measuring from your turrets. That's really where you should measure from. Probably won't see a difference if you measure from the objective lens. I will say the right way to do this, if you want to really make sure that everything is tracking correctly, is you measure with a 100-yard measuring tape, a good Lufkin, something like that, a measuring tape. That is gonna give you the absolute best results with the most fidelity, making sure that your gun is tracking properly. So this is one of the targets. And again, we also have some horizontal or windage adjustments to 5 MOA or 1.5 mils. We can test that and we can shoot that as well. This target is the one I typically use the most. This is US Optics target. You can get them just about anywhere. Just Google US Optics target. This target will come up. This gives us a little bit more information, and I think it's a little bit more useful in general. So again, we zero the gun. You can shoot around there, and then we're gonna go 2 mils left, then we can go all the way up to 8 mils. 7.5 in these boxes right here. We can track over, track down, and actually do a correct box target. It's what I typically do with this. And I'm looking at seeing what type of, how correct those turrets are tracking. Now, if your turrets aren't tracking perfectly, you know, hope is not lost, right? We can actually make up for that. You can put that in your ballistic app and it'll make an adjustment for you so that it knows exactly what is tracking. I just typically don't use a ballistic app to that degree. Almost everything I'm doing is off of data. I will start using that basically a lot of times just with clients. If they got a gun that I haven't used before, I look up some basic drop tables. We get usually some muzzle velocities. We'll feed that in and then we confirm that on paper. But folks, you know, stick to paper for the most part. Not only are you learning ballistics better, but when you write that stuff down in a data book, batteries don't go dead on a data book. When you start writing down all of your data, specifically with elevation, you're gonna remember that. Folks, when you're using a ballistic app and you just see it, you dial it, you shoot it, it's kind of like using a GPS. You remember a long time ago when we didn't have GPSs and we were able to get around just fine? Now we are so reliant on GPSs, if you don't have it, you don't even know where to go. So again, writing that stuff down internalizes it. So make sure you're writing that stuff down and you're keeping a data book at a minimum. So when we're actually shooting this, we're holding in the exact same spot every single time. This is our aim point, right? So I might go up 8 mils. All right, I'm still aiming there, but my impact should be up here. So we're aiming in the exact same spot. That's when you're shooting it. Now, if you don't want to shoot this and you just want to see if your turrets will track properly by watching your actual crosshairs move, folks, you got to get that gun level and you got to get that gun locked down into place using the gun vise, whatever you need, but it can't move, right? Now, once you have that gun locked down into place, all right, understand that if we're just watching our turrets or our crosshairs move when we dial, to make that crosshair move up, we're actually dialing down. To move it left, we have to dial right. Just understand it's the opposite. So a lot of rifles aren't gonna have that much negative elevation. So what I would recommend is start off by dialing plus 10 mils. So if I'm at plus 10 mils and I'm holding my crosshair right down here, if I want to see it track up 8, I'm going to dial down to plus 2. All right, so we're dialing negative elevation, and if everything is tracking correctly, our crosshairs at plus 2, dialing down from plus 10 down to plus 2, we would end up at 8 because those crosshairs would move upward. And the same is true for windage as well. So just understand that. Now, even though this is a mil target, and you can get MOA targets too, but even though this is a mil target, if you are shooting MOA, you can make that easy conversion. There's 3.44 MOA per mil, so you can make that conversion. You can still use this exact same target. So hopefully that makes sense. Anyways, let's go out there, let's hang these up, and let's shoot this thing. All right, so I want to jump in here real quick and talk about making a homemade target, because these homemade tall targets are probably every bit as good, if not better, than some of the commercially available targets. And obviously they're quick and easy to make, especially if you already have some cardboard backers or even a cardboard box or anything else. So I made this target using a cardboard backer, and then I used a carpenter square to make these lines. Now I will tell you right now, I found that this backer is not perfectly square. So, you know, these lines are probably not perfectly 90 degrees to one another. So just be aware of that. But we are going to use this vertical line and use a level or a plumb bob to make sure that this vertical line is indeed vertical to the earth. All right, we got to make sure that's vertical. So if you made sure that your gun is perfectly level and you line up your reticle on this, and then this line is not perfectly in line with your windage reticle, don't freak out. It's probably that this cardboard wasn't square to begin with. So just be aware of that. But in this example, we have an MOA target. All right, we're gonna have our point of aim down here. The length of this particular cardboard will give you about 25 MOA. So we're gonna aim down here. We're gonna dial 25 MOA, maintaining our point of aim right here, and we're gonna shoot 3 to 5 rounds. Then we're gonna measure that impact, whatever that impact is, and see if we're indeed getting exactly 25 MOA. Just understand that you're limited by the precision of your rifle. So if you have a rifle that shoots 1 MOA groups, that group may not be perfectly in line, and it may not track exactly with 25 MOA, but if that group is within 1 MOA, that's as good as you're gonna get. Now, of course, if you have a quarter MOA gun or half MOA gun, again, you're limited by that, and it should be within half MOA or quarter MOA, whatever the accuracy or precision of your gun is capable of. Just be aware of those limitations. And of course, we can do the exact same thing with a mil optic. Point of aim is down here. Given the length of this backer, we can get about 8 mils out of this one. So our point of aim is down here. We dial up 8, and you could dial in graduations all along the way and measure each of those groups. That's perfectly fine. You can absolutely calculate and draw in intervals all along the way if that's what you like. But I like to just leave it blank, and that way we can measure those groups. And you can either go to the maximum, you know, again, on this one, it's gonna be about 8, but you can go 2, 4, 6, 8. If you wanna shoot 3 to 5 round groups at each of those intervals and then measure that group. And of course, if you're shooting these at 100 yards for MOA, it's gonna be 1.047 inches for every MOA. For mils, it's gonna be 3.6 inches for every mil. Or if you're shooting this at 100 meters, it's gonna be 10 centimeters for every mil. So again, homemade options versus commercial options, both of them are good. You probably have some stuff laying around where you can go ahead, create this, and it's easy to do and take to the range and get some good information. Now, later on in this video, I'm gonna show you how to interpret this, as well as if your optic is not tracking perfectly, I'm gonna show you later on how to correct that as well. So stay tuned, we'll get to that. This is always the part that takes the longest, but we got this thing set. Try to get my big head out of the way. Let's see. There we go. All right, so we are square and level on that guy. Good to go. You can check it with a plumb bob. This is what the ancient Egyptians used. They actually used a Milwaukee wrench on the end of a string to build the pyramids. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. All right, folks, let's go back there and check out the gun and check that setup. All right, folks, so I'm getting ready to zero this. I will save you that footage. It's really neither here nor there. But one thing I do want to talk about, and you know, what's a video without at least one sexy pose, right? One thing I do want to talk about is that I normally do when I'm mounting a scope, a new scope especially. It's critical that you do this with a new scope. And you probably should do it every single time you get your gun out. New scopes and a scope that has been sitting for a while. All right, we wanna just turn those turrets. We wanna make sure that we work all these turrets. I do the parallax and everything too. That stuff will get, you know, stiff in there. It's been sitting a while. You need to turn all that stuff. Just freaking work it. You're not gonna damage it. And again, you're gonna cause more problems by not doing that. All right, so now I've done that. I'll probably do a little bit more when I turn this camera off, but I'm gonna get this gun zeroed, and then we'll talk more specifically about the tall target test and what you need to do to get set up for that. All right, folks, so this is outside the scope of this video, but it's worth mentioning. So that gun that I'm shooting right now is a 6.5 PRC. And in the past, I shot a video talking about 6.5 PRC on my own, shooting the 6.5 PRC Hornady 147 grain ELD match. And I got super erratic results. Well, I got in another lot of the Hornady, and so I wanted to try it on this gun. And folks, unfortunately, I was getting the exact same erratic results. Like 2 rounds would group, wouldn't change a thing, and then we'd have a major impact shift, and then those rounds would group in another spot. It was so bad the first time that I shot it on my gun that I literally thought something was loose on the gun. The optic was loose, the action was loose, but I happened to have some Norma Golden Target 6.5 PRC. This is 143 grain. And I shot that and I got excellent results. So it was 100% the ammo. Well, I had another lot of ammo, 147 grain PRC Hornady match. I'm a big fan of Hornady match. I love their ammo. Usually I get really good results out of the 6.5 Creedmoor. And I was chalking it up to a bad lot. Well, I was trying it on the client's gun. I got the same super erratic results, unfortunately. Switched over to the Golden Target. I had like 22 rounds of this, so I didn't want to shoot it all up. But anyways, the first group was this right here. I got just a 3-round group, good. Came down here, shot first round. From here, I went right half MOA. We got 1 impact there. I went up 1 click and I had that impact right there. So the impacts were very consistent with the dialing, which was good. So again, folks, just be aware, ELD match 147 grain isn't shooting well the MPAs. I think it has to do with the barrel twist. I know some people said they were getting pretty good results. You can go look at all the comments on that video. but I think it has to do with the 1 7.5 inch twist on that particular barrel. Other people that had other brands that had 1 7.5 inches were also having the same results I was. So anyways, just be aware of that. But anyways, what we're gonna do now, using the few rounds of the Norma that I have left, we're gonna go ahead and shoot this tall target. So let's do that. All right, folks, so normally what I would do is I'd actually shoot 3 rounds, and I would recommend to at least shoot 3 rounds at each elevation stop. This is MOA optic, so we're gonna go up 5, we'll shoot 1 at 0, then we'll go up 5 MOA, shoot 1, and then so on and so forth. Again, normally I'd recommend that we shoot 3 rounds, but I'm a little low on ammo, and that really doesn't have any effect on teaching you how to do this, right? So that's what you wanna do. But the other thing is you wanna make sure that that gun is level the entire time. So if you have an anti-cant device, you gotta be shooting with both eyes open, making sure that the thing is remaining level the entire time. And obviously what's nice about that LRA Send It is it's nice and bright. It's gonna let you know, you don't really have to focus on it. All right, so anyways, let's do this. It was dead in the black. Now we're gonna go up 5 MOA. All right. I'm aiming at the exact same point, folks. Again, making sure my gun is level. That was at 10 MOA. We're now going to 15. All right, now let's go to 20. Oh, I gotta be honest, folks, I feel like I pulled that one a little bit. Let's check that one out. Let's redo that one. Yeah, there we go. All right. What do we got left on there? Oh, we can go to 25. We're gonna be able to go 30. No, 25 is most we're gonna be able to do. All right. I pulled the shit out of that one too. All right, let's do one more. There we go. That was better. All right, so let's go down there and take a look at it. All right, so let's analyze our results here. So first of all, first round, dead in the black. We know the gun's zeroed, it's good to go. We went up 5 MOA. This was our first impact, and it's within a 1/4 MOA of where 5 MOA says it should be. And again, this is why it's really important to shoot at least a 3-round group so to account for any pulled shots, which we'll get to in just a second. Then we went up another 5 MOA to 10 MOA. Again, we're within a 1/4 MOA of where it should be, and we're looking pretty good there. Then we went up here to 15 MOA, added another 5, and that is almost definitely a pulled shot. And I know that because when we went up to 20 MOA, the first round I pulled bigger than shit. But the second round that I shot there, it is dead balls on 20 MOA. Again, shoot 3 rounds, it'll weed out any pulled shots. Then we went all the way up to 25 MOA. We're just slightly off, but what I'm seeing is a very straight line in general. And again, I think if we were shooting 3-round groups, we'd see much better because that was a pulled shot for sure. And so we have a very straight line. What I'm not seeing and what you will see, a bad tall target test, folks, you'll see impact here, then an impact out here, then an impact out here, then an impact out here. It is very obvious. It is well outside of the accuracy of that gun, right? So again, we're within a 1/4 MOA of most of these impacts or dead on. And that's what I want to see. So hopefully that makes sense and hopefully that helps you. We know that gun's zeroed. We know that gun is tracking pretty well. And again, I would actually go back to 15 MOA, and I may even do that and shoot another 3-round group if I'm seeing some sort of anomaly in the overall tracking pattern. You know, we went a little fat here, but I'll tell you, even on this entire string, I was getting pretty tired, starting to shake a little bit. It's been a long day, setting up everything. It is what it is. But Again, if you see some sort of anomaly, weed that thing out, right? Go through the process and make sure it's good to go. But overall, I'm really happy with the results. I'm not seeing major deviation. I think we're good to go. Again, we could shoot this again with 3-round groups, get a little bit more fidelity on the overall information, but at least now you know how to shoot this and you know how to confirm whether or not your optic is perfectly plumb on the gun. This is how you do it. Methodologies don't matter, results matter, and you gotta make sure that you're testing this stuff and proving it to work. That's really what it comes down to. All right, so I wanna go through and kind of talk about how to further interpret these results, but also how to eventually fix any problems that you might be having with tracking, because there's a couple different ways we can go about this. So one of the first things that I did when I got this target home is I went through with calipers and I was checking exactly how far off this was. And I was trying to see if there was any sort of consistent lean over there. Now, going back to the fact that a rifle's precision capabilities is going to dictate the results. So for instance, right here we have where 15 MOA would be. Each one of these circles is actually about 0.8 inches. It's the closest thing I could find to a 1-inch circle. But let's say you're shooting a 1 MOA gun, right? And these are perfectly 1 inch or 1.047 inches circles. You know, when you have a 1 MOA gun, your impacts could be as far east or west as 1 MOA or north or south 1 MOA. So you have to count for that and understand the precision capabilities of your rifle when you're doing these types of tests. So just be aware of that. But what I want to show you is when we see this impact is 0.28 from center. So that's well within the capabilities of that gun, right? 0.25 from center, 0.20 from center. Shooting 3-round groups is gonna give you more fidelity and give you more information. So we see well within, you know, a half MOA of center every single time. So we're not seeing any deviation that's outside of the precision capabilities of that rifle. All right, so let's talk about using this test to diagnose that your optic is plumb and your reticle is plumb inside the optic itself. So number one, if everything's good to go, you've mounted the optic properly and your reticle is plumb inside the optic, if you've hung this target upright, and this is indeed a plumb line, when you overlay your reticle, it is gonna match that perfectly. Now, if you mounted your scope, just like I showed you in my complete guide to precision scope mounting, and that body is the scope body itself is perfectly level, and now we have a reticle that is not showing plumb compared to this, all right, you most likely have a reticle that's not plumb inside the optic. Or maybe you screwed something up. So the first step as far as troubleshooting is going back, remounting that optic, double checking everything, you know, just taking your time, making sure you do it right, and then recheck that reticle again to make sure that it is indeed the problem and you just didn't screw something up, or as you were tightening down that last screw and it pulled it out of whack a little bit. So number one, diagnose and troubleshoot to make sure that that is not indeed the case. But if you've done troubleshooting and you know that your scope itself is mounted plumb to the rail, but we have a reticle that is out of line with this line, all right, you need to send that back. There's no real way to fix that. There really isn't. Now, let's say you're watching this video and you didn't mount it like I showed you. You mounted it using a method that used your reticle as the leveling apparatus, right? So you use the plumb bob method or something like that. If that reticle is actually canted on the inside, and so we've mounted our scope body to where our reticle is now plumb, but the scope body is slightly off, you may not even be able to tell just looking at it. Now, because your scope body can only move in 2 axes, up, down, left, and right, it can't move in diagonal. So if your reticle's plumb, but it's not plumb to the scope body, and you overlay this, the reticle may appear completely plumb and match this. But when you have a point of aim down here and you dial 25 MOA, you're gonna see those impacts with a pretty good amount of deviation, or at least a detectable amount of deviation. And this is exactly what you'll see with a tall target test that's indicating either the scope body or the reticle itself is out of plumb. You'll see a very clear trend line that's going off in one direction. So this is what it looks like when it's not right. But at the end of the day, the tall target test is the only thing that's going to confirm whether or not your scope body is mounted correctly, whether or not that reticle is plumb inside the optic, and whether or not your optic is tracking true. It's really what it comes down to. That's why this is critical. This is step one right after mounting the scope, and really it's part of scope mounting. It really has to be. So if you've never done this and you've already got your scope mounted, at least go shoot this just to confirm or deny whether or not everything is working as it should and it's set up the way that it should be. All right, so now let's talk about diagnosing and fixing an optic that is tracking what we call fat, or if it's tracking skinny. If it's tracking fat, that means it's actually tracking and we're seeing impacts greater than what we're dialing in as far as elevation goes. You can do the same thing for windage too. If it's tracking skinny, that means, again, we're seeing impacts with less elevation than we're dialing in. Now, there's two ways to address this problem when it comes to elevation specifically. Number one, if we're taking hard data and we're not using ballistic calculators, it really doesn't matter. So you can go out and you collect your data, you shoot at a target at 300, it says one thing. You shoot at a target at 500, you take that data down, it says one thing for elevation. And you just continue to build your data card and your drop table. So that is your hard data for your gun, your ammo, and your optic, right? So that's the data book there. And then one day you pull up a ballistic calculator and say, look, my data book is saying that my holds are slightly less than what the ballistic calculator says I should have. So you may have just identified a problem, but it was never a problem because you have that information, right? You're taking hard data on your gun. So the fact that it was tracking fat or skinny, you didn't know, and ignorance is bliss. So that's one way to do that. Now, if you are using a ballistic calculator, this is super important that you diagnose it and you get it as close as possible. So we'll use this as an example right here. I dialed in 15 MOA. What I was expecting to see was 15.71 inches from my point of aim. The actual was 16.25. So if we determined that this was consistent and this is how this optic was dialing every single time, what we would do is we would put a correction factor into our ballistic calculator. So the way that we're gonna fix this in our ballistic calculator is we're gonna take that expected impact in inches, 15.71 is the expected, and we're gonna divide that by the actual. In this instance, it would be 15.71 divided by 16.25, which was the measurement from here to there. That comes up with a correction factor of 0.967. So that's 0.967. All right, so now I'm gonna show you exactly how to fix this in applied ballistics. I'm sure most apps are pretty much the same, but let's take a look at this. Right here is the rifle that we are notionally shooting. We hit edit, we make sure all the data is right there, and then we go all the way down here to elevation corrector factor 1. That's saying it's a 1-for-1, that is indeed accurate. And let's just, for giggles, let's open this up, we'll hit our Hornady, and then we'll look at our drop table. And we'll see what it says for 500 yards. So for at 500 yards, a 1-for-1 elevation correction factor says we're at 7.4 at 500 yards. Now let's go back and actually fix this. So we're just gonna slide this to the left where it hit edit on this rifle. And where it says elevation correction factor, we're gonna delete that. We're gonna put in 0.967. We hit done, done. Now let's go take a look at what it says for elevation at 500 yards. So now it says it's 500 yards, it's 7.1. So we've trued up our mechanical elevation. And if currently you're seeing deviations, even though you've applied the right muzzle velocity, you're making sure that you're truing up your muzzle velocity at distance, you're still seeing a deviation between what your gun is doing and what your ballistic app is doing, this is probably the reason. All right, so there you go, folks. We've talked about analyzing this data, interpreting it properly, and then if there are corrections that need to be made, we know how to make them now. All right, folks, well, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was informative. I'm sure I left some things out, so if you have any questions, leave those down in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer those. And you know, while guns and gear are great, what we're really about is training. So make sure you go to ParamountTactical.com. Go check out our upcoming training schedule. We'd love to have you out. We'd love to meet you in person. We have long range courses, tactical carbine, handgun courses, CQB courses, low light courses, driving courses, on-road, off-road. We have an 800-acre state-of-the-art training facility. Come out here, you'll have a good time, I guarantee you. And for all your gear needs, make sure you go to ParamountTactical.com. The only thing that we sell are items that we have personally tested and we believe in, because we believe everything on our website is directly tied to our reputation and our credibility. But appreciate you watching, but until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.